Well, good morning, mostly ladies and the occasional gentleman. It's very gratifying to have visitors on a chilly, rainy morning like this in the Glens Falls Cemetery, and I thank you for coming to stop by. I'm a man who was known in life as the Honorable Jerome Lapham. The Honorable being a title I acquired by virtue of my service to our community in the New York State Assembly in 1865. Now, I was born December 4th, 1823, just 2 days after President James Monroe declared his famous doctrine. My parents, Jonathan and Elizabeth, were folks who were strongly influenced by my grandfather, Stephen Lapham, who came to this area from Rhode Island, seeking to find a perfect life in the wilds of upstate New York. Unfortunately, he fell to his death in 1802 at the age of 47 from the roof of the old Quaker church up on Sanford's Ridge, leaving my father and 10 other siblings and their mother to fend for themselves. The older, naturally, to look to the care and nurturing of the younger. Now, this instance had a strong influence on how I was raised, but also on the type of man that I would later become. Now, my parents moved us from Queensbury to Glens Falls in 1832. My father was adamant that his boys, Benjamin, Fletcher, and I, receive a good, solid education. And so I matriculated at the Glens Falls Academy for a year, but found that I was happier at the less formal West Street Common School, and discovered at age 12 that I was even happier just working. To my mind, there was much more excitement out in the world of work than there was sitting behind a desk. Now, my father, who was somewhat of a stoic, was puzzled, but he watched bemusedly as I moved from job to job, mastering one skill after another. By the age of 22, I had already worked as a canal boat driver, a teamster, an errand boy, a clerk, and a farmhand. The world of work was my university. The call to the big city rang like a five-alarmer in my head in 1845, and I was off to New York to work in my uncle's store, clerking a small retail tea and sugar operation. When I returned after a bit to Glens Falls, I was full of big city ideas. And I went right to James Morgan and convinced him to make me a partner in his large store down on the corner of Glen and Exchange Streets. You see, I knew what was popular with people. And armed with that knowledge, I was able to forge a career for myself. I settled down, and in 1846, I married the lovely Hannah Hoyt. In 1848, our son Byron was born, and 2 years later, in 1850, our daughter Helen. We built a large home down on the corner of Ridge and Maple Streets. What I understand is now the location of the northeast corner of the Glens Falls City Park. And the occasional passerby tells me that there's even a little one-way street that goes by the back of our property, named after our family, which is very flattering indeed. Well, I noticed after a few years that James Morgan was ceding more and more of the responsibilities of our growing store to me, as he began to take an interest in moving into the lumber industry. Now, I thought of James as an older brother and encouraged him. And when I was 33 and he was 48, we sold our company to James Rice and founded Lapham and Morgan Lumber Company. We established freight lines along the Champlain Canal and also along the Feeder Canal. Now, I was overjoyed because this was a life that was so familiar to me from my earlier adventures in the workplace. We purchased 8 boats, and the two of us made a fortune selling lumber. James became a major force in the business community, as did I. We even worked up a petition for the state legislature with 59 other citizens to make improvements to the Feeder Canal in order to make it more navigable, but unfortunately that never really went anywhere. Well, by 1863, I had grown tired and disillusioned with the ineptitude and corruption of local and state politics. And so I decided at age 40 simply to retire to a life of community service. You You see, I had accumulated a fairly large sum of money and had invested it wisely, principally in the paper industry, and I also kept my hands in all of James Morgan's ventures. So, in effect, I let Mr. Morgan make money so that I can enjoy a career in community service. I served our community as chairman of the Civil War Commission from 1864 to 1865 because I had been a major contributor to the Patriot War Fund in 1861. Now, these two acts of service enabled me to provide for the return of our veterans from the Civil War fronts, the well, the wounded, and the deceased, and see that they were accorded the honor and respect that they were entitled to. I was a firm believer in the sanctity of the United States of America and in our national form of government, and I was a big fan of our president, Abraham Lincoln. Now, I found that I was involved in community service of some sort or another and or monitoring my investments almost every night of the week. And so I decided to do something about that. I purchased a summer cottage on Phantom Island in Lake George, and I vowed that our family would spend a month there every year. No excuses, no interruptions. And that's a tradition which I understand continues into modern times. Summer on the lake. Now, you may know that Phantom Island was a rather small island across the channel from Glen Island. And there was a social club on Glen Island called the Glen Club, and I joined that and enjoyed many of the functions there. You may also know that Phantom Island was the home of the gentleman known as the mad painter John Henry Hill. Now, John Henry Hill came to live full-time, somewhat as a recluse on Phantom Island, in 1870. But unfortunately, after 6 years of being a recluse, was declared insane and was carted away to an insane asylum for the rest of his life. Fortunately, before he left, we were able to purchase from him a painting of Phantom Island for our family. Now, my work in community service was varied. I was a supervisor of the town of Queensbury for 4 years. I was a trustee of the village of Glens Falls, serving as president for 1 year of that body. I also was president of the First National Bank and a vice president of the Glens Falls Insurance Company. Of course, these were all mostly honorary positions. One of the things that I'm proudest of was my success in bringing the Fort Edward Horse Railroad to our area, because this opened up the region for not only rail travel, but also the trolley system. I worked for nearly 20 years to bring the trolley system to the city of Glens Falls, and when I finally succeeded in 1880, Glens Falls flourished, as I knew it would. I also worked very hard to extend the sewer system throughout Glens Falls and improve the quality of the city's drinking water, and also worked to improve the quality of education in Glens Falls. And I have to admit on this rainy day that I'm somewhat pleased by the results of my efforts. My children were also active members of the community. Byron married Minnie Spencer, and they brought much joy into our home down on Ridge and Maple Streets with their little son, Walter. Helen married C.L. Rockwell, proprietor of the Rockwell House Hotel in downtown Glens Falls. My patient and long-suffering wife, Hannah, who endured my late-night meetings in ways much more than any woman should have been asked to, lived to the ripe old age of 90, passing in 1918, still living in our home down on Ridge and Maple. I, in turn, departed this wonderful life on November 5th, 1898. As I stand here this morning and think about my many relatives who rest at peace here with me, I think about something that was written in the Glens Falls Messenger the day after my death, and I quote, "The passing of Mr. Lapham will be mourned by the entire community. He was possessed of a kindly disposition, and his many acts of charity will be long remembered." As I think of my relatives who live today in this community, I'm compelled to note that 201, they are also possessed of kindly dispositions and also will be long remembered for their charitable contributions. And I would ask you as you move through your day today to consider this question. What more could I, or anyone else for that matter, ask for from our lives than that? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I bid you a good day.